The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host, assisted ably today with one of my prayer partners who might be known to you already, Lisa Zarita.
Good
And,
morning.
and over here with Toto, the canine face of God. Okay. Um, Lisa and I, this is part three. It's the trilogy, the third part of the story of Bridget, not dead, just bouncy. So if that doesn't mean anything to you, you might want to circle back to the previous two episodes. So this one might have more meaning. But it happens that several years ago, Lisa and I were together in prayer, dealing with the dream that actually that Bridget didn't bring us. Remember this?
Right. It was brought through other folks.
This one was the dream felt like a collage of scenes sort of pasted together one after another of people falling. And even when I woke up from it, I thought this seems like one of those collectives where people are temporarily gathered in a place because or with others who died in a way similar to their own death, and where it's sort of it seems it's therapeutic, but when people first arrive there, they're not very open to anything. They're just not there yet. They're not quite capable of participating very much, but they grow in that capacity, and as they do, they become wiser. Um, they gather truth. They get some sort of spiritual momentum and positivity going, and eventually arrive at the place where you and I and the other prayer partners aren't so much doing therapy or counseling. We're just maybe a little bit around the edges. We're mostly helping people out the door.
Yeah, that's right. And their stories remind us of the parts of our lives where we might be a little more stagnant and waiting for that new growth to come in.
Right. And then this week, I came to podcasting before I even listened to podcasts. Maybe listened to a few of them, but I kind of even didn't know how. So this week, or a few days ago anyway, Lisa and I paired up to do part two of this trilogy, and then the dang thing didn't record. So it was lost. And I couldn't wait for you for our calendars to link up yet again because we had a deadline to meet. So I had to redo part two on my own. But today we are able to be together.
Yes.
So for me, this is a Sunday morning when I didn't have a public mass to say, which hardly ever happens. So I just thought I'd be that early worm, bird that gets the worm. I got up early and went to a 7 a.m. mass. So I was spiritually ready for the day. And one of the things that on the calendar is being with you. Uh, there's
Yeah.
there's a
That's
little
great. We went last night, so we're set as well. And what a great way to spend a Sunday morning.
Yeah, for those of you that are not Catholic church attenders, most of our churches have a Saturday night service or a very early Sunday morning one, and then there's mid-morning, and then some of them even have a Sunday night. So you can often kind of plan your activities around which mass are we going to. And being in a large family of five kids, we didn't often go as a group because it was just too much hassle to get everybody ready at the same time. So we pair off. But today, um, I was up early and I brought home the donuts. I'm staying over at my friend Father Richard's house, and of course Toto was going to accompany me today.
It's a great partnership. I love seeing Toto.
Yeah, I do too. Well, anyway, so the subject today is the Bridget not dead just bouncy story, but our focus is on spiritual practice that might be helpful to people that might have some connection to Bridget's story. In brief, remember, Bridget was about 11 years old when she fell from a tree because the limb broke. Uh, and it was a climbing tree that lots of children climbed. So she understood that she wasn't doing something particularly daredevilish. Although anytime children know that anytime they climb anything, there's an adult there ready to say, "Get down from there, you'll hurt yourself." But then when it did happen, and then she did hit the ground in a way that affected her such that she went out of body. She was conscious that she was out of body, and she said, "I was locked out. I couldn't get back in." And once she came, and then I think she told us that some spirit people came for her, but she was afraid because she had just done something wrong and bad, and it was very bad. And she thought, in her fear, that I've just done a bad thing. And she had the fleeting thought that if I'm dead, my parents just lost their daughter because I did a bad thing. And
Right.
she thought to herself, anything that would happen after this bad thing is probably even a worse thing. And so she said, I ran to hide. And, we don't do that alone. Even if she thought she was alone, her guardian would have been accompanying her. And she landed in this place with all these other people. And that's kind of where our story picks up today, unless you'd like to add something to that.
No, that's exactly right.
Um, so, I mean, again, we're just telling stories from experience. We're not trying to uh, create new doctrine or dogma or any such thing. We're just experiencing things and passing them along for your own benefit. Anyway, you have put some prayer and effort into thinking about how the story of Bridget operates. You are now the mother of an 11-year-old, aren't you?
Yes, newly 12.
Newly 12, okay. And I remember when we were doing this several years ago, I think it's about 4 years ago now, that I was thinking as I was listening to you, Bridget was within me speaking through, but we were co-conscious. And so I'm fully alert to her presence and your presence. And I was thinking, it's so nice that this one would, that you were the prayer partner on it because you just had such a nice maternal uh, response or tone to the way that you spoke to her.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I love children, as you know, and so it was easy. I think it was easy to speak with her, and the fact that she was very profound, even in her youth, made it all the more delightful.
Yes. She even told us that she was surprised that she was the one to do the talking, which involved some sort of leadership. She said, I wasn't even one of the ones in the picture in your dream. I didn't take part in that. But there are people here that are asking me to do this. I'm not volunteering on my own or presuming that I have some skill. She said, there's people older than me and smarter. And if I'm doing it wrong, just tell me so and I'll get out of the way. She couldn't have been more modest about it.
Yeah, that's what I love about Bridget, and that was one of the pieces I reflected on was her service. Because she just rose to the challenge.
Well, the reason that we tell these stories in any venue at all, and including a book, but then sometimes moving that on to a podcast, is because we hope that the experience of this person uh, and their gracefulness will somehow touch you, the listeners and viewers here. So, Lisa, I know you've already put some thought into it. What direction did your thoughts move when you started thinking about a spiritual practice that we could recommend to our listeners and viewers that might come from this story?
One of the things that I love about all of this and our ministry of this is that how we take these stories and the nuggets of wisdom and relate it to our own lives. And I think in particular, concerning this topic, it's most important to think about what will lead each of us to the fullness of life where we are living in our greatest capacity of who God created us to be. And the most interesting part of all of this is that it's often not about us, but it's about contributing to others by, both within our small circles, our families, our friends, our work environments, and stepping outside, of our own pockets. And when I was looking at Bridget's story, as she kind of grew into her own, the one thing that I saw several things, but the first thing was a shift in perspective
Yes.
But after, and we talked about this in the last time, after something bad had happened, she shifted her perspective in an intentional way. She saw her experience as a fall, not as a fall, but as a bounce to spring back. And I think for us, one of the most powerful ways to shift perspective is through gratitude. Now, by nature, I'm an optimist, but it's not because only good things have happened in my life, right? I mean, you've known my life for many years, and I've had tragedies. I've had grief and loss. My mother died when I was 9 months old. My husband and I lost three babies to miscarriages. And there were other rocky moments in life, but it's the rocky paths, and it's not those of the achievement and of successes, I believe, that enable us to have that deep-seated gratitude. And it requires intention, an intentional perspective to shift your heart, to have trust and patience that the good will happen, even if it's not happening right there and then in whatever difficulty you're experiencing. But to see the good, you can still see the good that is already in our midst. And so gratitude as a spiritual practice, noticing the very small things, I think you can start with. And I think thinking of Bridget as a child, I think it was perfect because I think children often teach us better than adults.
Yeah.
It was funny. I went to see Annie, the musical, this weekend with my daughter, and there was a scene in there where a man who, or I think it was a woman who slept outside and she didn't have a home, and she said, "My blanket is of newspapers." And Annie's response in this theater was, "Well, you can read in bed, this is see
That's a
the
good line.
good."
Yeah.
And so now not all of us can be that optimistic, and the seeing the good while you're in the yuck is not always easy to see, but it's trusting and what will come, and trusting in, I guess, and just hoping. And if we find it difficult to be hopeful, I think that's precisely where God enters in. It doesn't come easy. If it doesn't come easy, we can ask God for help. And it's a very simple concept, but I think it's something we forget to do because we're not meant to conquer difficulties on our own.
Yes. When you were first um, getting into the beginning of that, I was thinking how when you were kind of establishing your credentials as a person who's known tragedy, that the fact that you have sad emotions and sad thoughts after heartbreaking events doesn't mean they get to boss you around. There's a kind of a freedom that says, yes, I'm sad because this happened or that, and I can't change it. This thing that broke my heart has broken my heart. However, I'm in charge here, and I get to think the thoughts that I want to think, and I can be hopeful because I have the capacity to choose to do that. You might not be able to get across the finish line. That's where you when you butt up against your limit, you can say to God, who is without limit, get in here, please.
Get in here and help me now. And I think the words you just spoke were the epitome of the serenity prayer, right? God, help me accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that, in my life, when I recognize, and I don't always do it well, but when I recognize, God's there to help me, come on, I need to just call on it in a real way and trust and believe that.
And it can be incremental. There might be
Yes.
people listening to this who have chronic depression and who
Yes.
might listen to that and think, fine for you to say, but I deal
Yes.
with chronic depression. Well,
Yes.
yeah, but even people who have lots of moments of depression in their life can step out of it for a bit.
Well, that's right. And it can be kept simple. As I was reflecting too, I think music, and it sounds again simplistic, but a song often whether even a spiritual song, if your listeners are inclined to any sort of spirituality, that that brings in the most important aspects of prayer or scripture or any parts of that can be extremely moving. Even a song, even simple songs on the radio, they can have they can have meaning. And I remember long ago when you first started this work, because I knew you had this gift decades ago, that you just came forward more publicly with now. But I remember decades ago you saying, because you have a gift of prophecy, that's what this is, but you saw glimpses of heaven and you related it to music, and I've never forgotten that heaven is a bit like music, coming and intertwining all the different parts and sectors and so forth, and kind of uniting together in a melody that makes sense and that is good. And I think that music in our lives can be a simple way, so to kind of shift people out of that perspective, that depression, whatever that challenge is in their lives.
Well, we do go back an awful long way, and when I wake up, I'm in the guest room here, and I'm looking at the bed I woke up in. Um, as soon as I'm aware that I am awake, I pray to Saint Michael, the archangel.
Yes, yes,
It's a simple prayer that well, it goes, Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. He's often depicted as a Roman soldier with a spear or a sword, but the way he's depicted oftentimes makes him look like he's enjoying being warlike, and that's not what I know him as at all. He's just trying to protect us all. Yet he's the patron of police. We don't want the police wailing on suspects. We only want them subduing them with the least amount of force necessary to keep people safe. Anyway, he that Saint Michael prayer, I pray it first thing in the morning, and I was given the opportunity. He spoke to me years ago, back when you were in college, and I was your campus minister. Um, we were in a conversation, but we're two persons. He's an angelic person, I'm a human person, but we're still two people. And I wanted to know him not just as this protector thing he's famous for, but since we were talking, I said, "Would you mind?" I asked him, "Do you know what a hobby is?" You
that's great.
know? And he said, "It's an interest that a person has that's peculiar to them, that
Hmm,
might stand out in a more powerful way. Isn't that it?"
it's
And I said,
true.
"Yeah, that's exactly it. I would like to know you better, and I wonder if you have any hobbies." And so
Love it. I love that question.
he said, "Something that I have a particular love for that is peculiar to me." He said, "I love to sing."
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he said, "I just love to sing." And I said, "Well, all the angels are, especially in our Christmas carols, the
Yes,
or even in the prayers of the Mass, the Gloria and the Holy for people that are from
yes,
our worship are prayers that are sung by angels.
yes,
We repeat it, but they're the ones that started it. We're really quoting them, and those, especially when there's choir or a cantor, those are best sung rather than
yes.
and and then he said something like, "Remember that we both are a beautiful vibration. That's what we are at the most elemental level.
Mm,
You and I
that's
are both
beautiful.
vibrating beings, and what music is an intentional kind of vibration that we throw out into the air around us and into the ears of anyone listening and so on." So when you were talking about if you're depressed, there might be music that brings you out of it. Well, you're already a certain kind of music. You already are that.
I love that. I love that. And what a beautiful way to kind of just couch that and to know that you can, you're just a part of it. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that you mentioned the saints. Saint Michael is a favorite saint of mine. And I think as I was reading Bridget's story as well, that the saints came to mind with her actions and her behaviors. And, our Catholic faith, you can probably speak to this, really well, that how our Catholic faith invites the saints, and you do that in prayer, but the saints invitation need not be only for Catholics. They can be for, all people from all backgrounds, all denominations, all walks of life. And you've done the work with the saints whenever we do prayer sessions, or really any prayer at all. I've learned that from you, to call in the communion of saints and to really help see that they intercede on our behalf. They're people that have lived lives worthy of virtue, but they weren't perfect all the time, but they have a measure of holiness and virtue that enters in.
Well, and holy is related to the Latin word sanctus, or
Oh.
sanctify. And holy in English sounds like whole, like
Mm.
WHOLE, to be complete. So a holy one isn't this rarefied gem of a person that is so utterly different than all the rest of the great unwashed. They're just somebody who has somehow come full circle to understand that they're whole and that they're not just broken parts. And when we have tragedies, we can feel shattered, and we can feel isolated and away from others who can't understand us because we're in such pain. Um, the
Yes, and Bridget taught us that in her story, which I appreciate, and I thought she was the perfect example of the Saint Francis prayer. That tons of people, right, relate to across backgrounds and experiences. And I'm sure your listeners are familiar with it.
I'm sure you're going to give us a little bit of it in case they
Yes.
aren't.
Yeah. So it's Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there's darkness, light. Where there's sadness, joy. And the idea is that to not seek to be consoled, but to console, to not seek to be understood, but to understand, because it's in giving that we receive, and it's to be loved is to love, and
Yeah.
some pardoning we're pardoned. Yeah.
And do you remember part of the story that Bridget related to us was that even though she arrived there frightened and ran to hide, her hiding place wasn't um, all that effective. She was hiding in a place where there were other people. I suppose when you play hide and seek, I did that as a child, and we didn't always go to an individual hiding place. Sometimes you went with two or three other people and hid in the same spot. And it's kind of like that's the way it worked for her. But once she was there, there were people talking to her. And one of them is the one that suggested, remember that you don't have bones that break anymore.
Yeah.
You don't
Hmm.
have blood that
Hmm.
would gush out of a wound anymore. The bodies that you have now could fall, but not break. You're not dead. You're just bouncy. She didn't invent that. She might have added that bouncy word,
Right.
but
Right.
but the idea behind it was given her, and because she was receptive to it, she was able to receive it.
She was receptive, and with that receptivity, she did, which was one of my most favorite parts, which to me is a spiritual practice, is service. She was able to lead. I think at the end there were 25 or 30 people, because this was one of the cluster stories, which
Yeah.
are a little miracle in and of themselves. But she took on an approach of servant leadership. She
Yes.
sees that opportunity, right, to use that to heal and to use it for service of others. I remembered that image at the end when people were leaving, of individuals moved to reach down and lift each other up onto the trailer. It was a beautiful image. The hand lifting the other up, and
Yes.
I loved the way that she did service, because she was open, first of all, to answer the call. She was willing. And she was also very humble. She didn't see herself as the smartest, the most capable, and she didn't serve for recognition, but simply to help. She was smart about the way she served, right? She was trying to inspire people. And one of the best ways to gather, right? She talked about getting the grown-ups going. If you let them think they're in charge, it's not a trick, but it can help them. If they think that they're helping kids who need the help, then it gets the adults, out of themselves. And
And
yeah,
and particularly some of the adults she was talking about were adults who died while they still had small children.
yes, yeah,
Grieving the fact that they weren't with their kids and their kid, their kids are orphaned or whatever. And then there are other kids there that had left like she did, while their parents still alive. And she was able to, so they're both incomplete kinds of people who are still in sorrow. But she said, if you get them to, sometimes they'll do something for someone else before they would do it for themselves.
yes, exactly. And she had compassion as a young child. She had compassion for them. She started seeing some people that were sadder than her, that were, they were frightened. And I think that's a practice for that we can take note of that she did. Compassion without minimizing what you went through, but still compassion for the others. And she understood her way to serve. Remember her saying, I'm old enough, I'm old enough, but I'm still young enough to be like an older sister to the kids, to the
Yeah,
little
she
ones.
understood that she didn't
Mhm.
need to be anything other than what she was. That sometimes little kids look
Yes.
up to older kids, and there are kids here that are younger than me that might look up to me.
Yes, exactly. And I think the service being reciprocal. So if we do service as a spiritual practice, that we see that, in spite of ourselves or because we're involved in this, that we then heal and we progress the next step, just like she does.
Yeah,
It's a
and oftentimes service is done in groups. You and I both
yes,
know that. And
yes,
you don't need to think of yourself as competent to drive everything across the finish line. You just might be more like in a bucket brigade. You
yes.
or assembly line or something. You do this thing and then you head it off to the next one or relay race, something like that. Where as long as you do your part, you don't have to feel like you're in charge of, the whole operation. You just do your part. Mhm.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I think she gave just so many different pieces of, and nuggets of wisdom that we can take for spiritual practice, right? So the gratitude, the saints, the music, the song, and service.
I want to add that one of the things I think that Bridget could be the patron of is moving past fear, because the
Yes.
story starts with fear. She runs,
Yes.
hides because she's afraid that something bad has already happened and something worse is probably going to follow. Well, there's probably people listening and are watching this episode that recognize themselves in that. And it's not by accident that the Old and New Testaments of the Bible have the phrase fear not over and over and over again. One of those is to Mary, the teenage girl, who an angel appears and says, "What do you think about having God's child?" It's
Right.
embedded in our Christmas story. And she doesn't leap at the chance and said, "I've been waiting for this call,
Right.
I'm the perfect person for the job." She just, in fact, she asked, "How in the world would that happen?" And and then once it was put to her, she just said, "Let it be done to me. I'm the Lord's servant. If that's what the Lord wants, the Lord knows what the Lord's doing. So yeah, go ahead."
That's right. That's right. And that fear, I think, can be very debilitating
Yes.
for folks, right? And we can be very hard on ourselves and, carry experiences with us that really just aren't conducive to living the full life that God wants, And I think a lot of times people hide in their own ways, perhaps, alcohol, drugs, work, shopping, TV, you name it. But getting that away. That I remember you saying this in another teaching that the most published saying in the whole Bible is "Do not fear."
Yes, over and over again.
Yeah,
And
and
you and I both are part of the brother and sisterhood of back pain. Uh,
yes, we are.
you have a lot more of it than I do, and have had it more severely and stuff. But you know how when healthcare folk approach somebody that they know is in pain, they'll ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how is it?
Yes.
All right. Um, well, if there are people listening who just feel like I'm just afraid, remember that it can have degrees. And don't assume that your fear is necessarily a 10. You might be able to look at a dashboard or, the volume control or something and say, I don't have to stay at a 10. I'm not always terrified. It's just that when this thought comes up, I move that way. But could you say, again, with God's help, however you imagine God, higher power, could we dial it down, please? Because
Mhm.
it's noisy, it's limiting, it's controlling. I don't want my fear to make me useless.
Yes.
I want to be of service. And could we dial it down some so that I can actually accomplish something good and positive? You know?
Yes, I love that. That's a beautiful image.
And
Hmm.
that can be done in prayer. That doesn't just have to be thought. You can
Hmm.
sit still and think, you know what? However you do it, I begin in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And as you know, I call in all my saint and angel friends. And I ask really positive ones to come and be inside me. Bring some positivity because right now I feel negative. So Dominic, the joyful friar, we're both Dominican. Uh,
Yes.
I bring him because of joy. And I have several other like joy friends. I'm just saying,
Yes.
I need you to get over here and be joyful around me because I need that right now in order to be free. So I believe anybody can do that. It's a prayer practice that you just sit still and you talk to your heart and those you invite into it and say, I really want to not be afraid, and I want to have a certain amount of peace so that I can have some thoughts and make some decisions that will be for someone's good. Because if I just sit here in my fear, I stay in the dark and I do very little.
Absolutely. Amen.
Well, that's about what I've got to offer. But remember that everybody who has died is still alive. That's one of my bedrock things, and that's basic Christian Orthodox teaching. Bridget's a real person, and it might not, I mean, in our Catholic tradition, we don't think that much of it about calling in the angels, the saints, and the souls. But if you're not from that background, it's something that you could experiment with. I believe you can pray. I use the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the names of God in our triune Trinitarian tradition, and then just say, "Hey, Bridget, you know, would you come over here and be with me? Hey, Toto, would you come and be with me? Yeah. Would you come and be with me? Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an upraised paw. Yes. I
I think it is. I
he's
think it
signing
is. And
up.
that's,
You
yeah.
raised your hand. You're willing to be a prayer partner. Help me out.
Well, and that's one of the things I truly appreciate is that this work opens up people to, these new possibilities, these new perspectives, and why wouldn't God use all of the goodness, the good and the good means that are necessary to help people heal, to remind us that death is not the end of the book and that love is waiting for us to fully live in it and surround us now with the many people we can call upon, as you mentioned, for help.
Amen. And I want to add this one last thing because a lot of the people that I deal with that have lost a child. I'm thinking of Bridget's parents didn't factor in this story very much. She made one passing reference to them.
Yes.
But if you are a parent that's had a child die, especially in a sudden way, although I don't suppose it matters, however a child dies, it's going to be a heartbreak.
Yes.
But some people do that after doing everything in their power to try to get this child the healing that we wished would have happened, either in a standard medical circumstance or uh, maybe addiction counseling or whatever. And if your loved one died after you made efforts to try to save them, all isn't lost. I believe you can send prayers now and say, what if there is afterlife rehab that's really helpful, where they know what needs to happen and where you're receptive and where you don't die anymore? I believe that you can pray for people like uh, Bridget to move into the light. Don't in this place where all these people are who have fallen, there are some of them that are more off to the edge than others. She was, and she moved in the direction of light and freedom. And I believe our prayers can help do that. You can encourage your loved one in prayer and say, sweetheart, get uh, follow the program. And you might have even been paying for rehab earlier. And I sometimes think of my prayers as like currency. Like, here's some money. Here's some here's something that might make possibilities happen because I prayed that you'd have the resources you needed.
That's an important message.
All right. Anything else, or are we good?
I think we're good.
All
Thank
right.
you for
All
this
right.
morning. Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, Lisa Zarita, for being with us. Toto, thank you for being with us. And thank all of you for being with us as you're listening or watching this podcast. Remember that we keep you in our prayers. I'm speaking in the royal we, at least I do. Uh, and if there's something that I or we might be able to do for you, please be in touch. You can contact me through my website, nathan-castle.com. And if you had a message for Lisa, I'd see that she got it. We're in regular touch with.
Yes, yes, and they can email me, or you can share that message with me. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So for now, that's this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. We're grateful for your attention, and we believe that was a big dog yawn. We're grateful for your attention and look forward to being with you the next time. God bless. Bye-bye.
Many blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.